Yeah, we're in Maaser Sheni Gimel Zion.
If a tree stands inside but inclines to the outside, or stands outside and inclines to the inside, what faces the wall inward is considered inside, and what faces the wall outward is considered outside. Oil presses whose entrances are inside but their interiors are outside, or the entrances are outside and the interiors are inside, Beit Shammai says all is considered inside, but Beit Hillel says what faces the wall inward is considered inside, what faces the wall outward is considered outward. The chamber is built in the holy part and opening into the non-holy part. Their interior is not holy, but their roofs are holy. Built in non-holy and opening into holy, the interior is holy, but the roofs are non-holy. Built in the holy and non-holy.
Right. So that second case, the second case there is actually a hypothetical case because there was nothing in the Mikdash that was built on Chol but was open into the Kodesh. But there was the converse case where the chamber itself was built inside into the side of the Har Bayis, but the entrance was only to the outside.
Built
so carry on, yeah.
Built in the holy and non-holy, and opening into the holy and non-holy, their interior and roofs above the holy and toward the holy are holy, and above the non-holy and toward the non-holy are non-holy. If Maaser Sheni, which was brought into Yerushalayim, became unclean, whether by an avatuma or by a velad havatuma, whether inside or outside, Beit Shammai says it must be redeemed, and all must be eaten inside, except that which became unclean by an avatuma outside. But Beit Hillel says all must be redeemed and eaten outside, except that which was rendered unclean by a velad hatuma inside. Okay.
Right. Okay. Today's Mishnah. Mishnah Yud halakoach bekesef Maaser Sheni shenitzma. Okay, now something was somebody purchased some. They brought their money of Maaser Sheni to Yerushalayim, and they purchased some peiros with that in Yerushalayim. Okay, Yipade says the Tanna Kama, this may be redeemed. Now, normally we say that produce that was brought into Yerushalayim, Maaser Sheni produce that's brought into Yerushalayim, you can't redeem. But now it's become tamei, so therefore it is allowed. Now there's a heter to redeem it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yikaver says no, you can't. It has to be buried. It's finished. It's Maaser Sheni. You can't redeem it, and you can't do anything with it. So therefore, it must be buried. Amru lo Rabbi Yehuda. Excuse me. They said, "Ma im Maaser Sheni atzmo shenitzma." If the original Maaser Sheni became tamei, hare hu nifte. It can still be redeemed. Alakoach bekesef Maaser Sheni shenitzma eno din sheni yipade. So if something was only purchased with Maaser Sheni funds, it's not even the original Maaser Sheni. Surely you should be allowed to redeem that. Amar lahim lo. He says it actually makes a good point. This is not a good kal v'chomer. Why? Ima martin b'Maaser Sheni atmo shekein hu nifte b'tahor u'bericho makom. The original Maaser Sheni produce is allowed to be redeemed while it's tahor even, and it can even be redeemed at a distance. Okay. But something that was purchased with Maaser Sheni funds, if it is tahor, it may not be redeemed. So how can you make a kal v'chomer on this case over here? So it seems to be a pretty logical point that Rabbi Yehuda makes over here, and he does schlag up the kal v'chomer pretty well. Nonetheless, the halacha does not follow Rabbi Yehuda. It follows the Tanna Kama that if Maaser Sheni became tamei in Yerushalayim, it can still be redeemed onto money, and that can again be used to purchase Maaser Sheni food.
I had a few mishnayos before about bringing the produce in with the Maaser Sheni money, and
Right. So if you bring it in, you can. Once the produce is brought in, it can't be taken out again. And if it was brought in as tevel, and then taken out and separated, and then the Maaser Sheni still has to come back. Right. Okay. So it's that strict on the Maaser Sheni that's been redeemed. Once Maaser Sheni has come to Yerushalayim, you're normally not allowed to redeem it. But now in this case, it can be redeemed because it became tamei. Okay. So he went and he purchased a wild animal, a deer, an antelope, and that is not fit for the mizbeach. If he'd brought a cow or a sheep or a goat, then he should have brought it as shlamim. But this is not worthy for the mizbeach, so it's just stam food. Okay, and now it died. Okay, so now all he's got over here is an animal that was sanctified for Maaser Sheni, and and it's and it's and its skin. Now the skin normally is a useful thing.
Right.
Okay, Yikaver al yedei oro. This now has to be buried with its skin. Rabbi Shimon says, "Wait, why do you have to do that?" He said, Rabbi Shimon says, "Yipade. Why not? Why not redeem it?" Okay. Now the reason, the basis of this argument is that what are you going to redeem it for? You're going to redeem it, and what you're going to do now with this carcass, you can feed it to the dogs. That's not a So it says the Tanakama that that's not a respectable thing to do to something that was kadosh, that you're going to you're just going to feed it to the dogs. That's
Right.
not and that's not appropriate. And Rabbi Shimon says not a problem. Okay, the difference between that obviously and the previous case where you had let's say produce of Maaser Sheni that became tame, so you redeem it. Okay, so tame people can eat it, but once an animal has died, nobody can eat it. It's just going to be going to the dogs anyway. So Rabbi Shimon says no, it can still be redeemed anyway. Now, okay. Next case. The kacho chai ushchato. If he first purchased it when it was alive and he shechted it, and then afterwards the meat became tame. Yipade, says Tanakama, this is exactly the case that we had in the previous, basically in the previous, where now it became tame, so it can still be eaten by tame people, or at least by people who don't care about tumotara. Okay, so it can be redeemed. It's kosher meat. It's no longer nevela. So this is no different from the previous case. Now Rabbi Yossi comes and says Yikaver, let it be buried. Now why Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yehuda also held this in the previous Mishnah when he was talking about produce. He said it had to be buried. Now Rabbi Yossi is coming and adding to this. Now Rabbi Yehuda himself would agree with Rabbi Yossi, except Rabbi Yossi is more machmir. Right, he's more machmir than Rabbi Yehuda. He holds that even though it was purchased alive, it's like peiros that were purchased with kesef Maaser Sheni. So it's so therefore it's got the same din that it can't be. So Rabbi Yossi would have agreed with Rabbi Yehuda in the previous Mishnah, but in this case he goes further than Rabbi Yehuda and says that that even though it was purchased alive, it's like food that was purchased with Maaser funds, and therefore it cannot be redeemed again. So he adds a more stringent opinion over here, which is not the halacha. Lekacho shachut v'nitma, if it was purchased shechted, and then it became tame, harehu kaperos. Now there, in that, which means that it's just like regular produce, which means that Rabbi Yehuda comes in and adds in his and also says that this is that this must be buried like he did in the previous Mishnah. It's just like peiros. Okay, so just to summarize the positions over there, with peiros, if you purchase peiros and that becomes tame, the Tanakama and the halacha is that it can be redeemed, but Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi say that it must be buried because it's basically food that was purchased with Maaser funds cannot be redeemed even if it becomes tamei. That's their shita, which we don't hold by. Rabbi Yossi comes and holds extra on this, that even if you purchased a live animal, now the live animal is not yet food. Okay, the live animal is not yet food, and he shechted it, so now it becomes kosher food, and then it became tamei. He still holds that it has to be tamei, which Rabbi Yehuda says I don't go quite that far. But if he purchased meat, if he came with Maaser money and directly went to the butcher and purchased meat, and that meat became tamei, then Rabbi Yehuda comes and says, yeah, that's just like peiros. So then,
no, go ahead.
Okay, so you're good with that.
We had the Mishnah a few last week where it be brought in. It was brought in. My Sheni money was brought in, and then it became unclean, and so it had to be set out to pasture. And when it died, then right, we had that with.
Hold on, say that again.
The animal became unclean after it was brought in, and it was.
Animal cannot become unclean if it's alive. If an animal's alive, it cannot become tamei. unless you're using it as a golel for a grave, which is not recommended.
So what was the one where we had where the animal? I guess it wasn't. It was brought in, but it died. I remember it died, and then we had it. It had to be set out in the field and left to die. It didn't die yet. I'm sorry, it didn't die.
So
Yet.
So there are a few cases where an animal has to be left to die. For example, a chatas where the owner died. So he designated a chatas for himself, and then he died. So this animal cannot be used for anything else, and it has to be left to die. That's one of those cases. But we haven't seen that recently. We saw that with you're right. We did see a case of where an animal had to be left to die recently, but I can't remember it.
Yeah, it was last week. We did. Okay.
Okay. Well, then we should hit it in the chazaras soon.
Okay.
Okay. Hamash il kan kanim Maaser Sheni. Now what happens is he's got Maaser Sheni wine, and he wants to bring it up to Yerushalayim. So he says, "Oh, let me just pull some of the stuff out of my cupboard, and I'll take it up. I've got a few jars, and I'll put the wine into there." So in other words, he's lending the jars for use for Maaser Sheni. He doesn't have any intention to turn the jars into Maaser Sheni themselves. He just wants to use them to transport the Maaser Sheni wine. So Afal Pishe Gafan, even though he seals the things because he wants to transport them to Yerushalayim and he doesn't want them to leak. So he's put a seal around the mouth. Nonetheless, Lo Kana Maaser, the jars do not take on the status of Maaser Sheni. Zalaf Lesochan Stam, however, if he just poured wine into them stam without making any statement about
You froze.
Sort of lit. I wonder why that keeps happening. I mean, I can see on my other computer that my face freezes and nothing else, and I can hear you perfectly, but my own. Okay, so back to.
You stopped right where you said he didn't say anything, right?
Right, he didn't say anything, so he didn't specify that he was just lending these kalim. Okay. So Zalaf Zocham Stam, Achilo Gafan Lo Kana Maaser. If he didn't seal them, then fine. He's just using them to transport the Maaser. Misha Gafan Kana Maaser. So once he has sealed them, then the jars themselves become the property of Maaser Sheni. So if he then subsequently drinks the wine, and he's now left with a kli, he's got to now sell this kli or redeem the kli onto money and use that money for Maaser Sheni. Okay. Now, here's another case, another ramification of sealing the jar. Okay, if he hasn't sealed them, then let's say you have truma. If you have truma wine inside there and it got mixed up, and we don't know which jar is the truma, if he hasn't sealed it up, then the wine is considered part of the rest of the wine. Okay, so if it's among 100 other similar sized jars of wine, and you don't know which one of them is the truma, then we can say, okay, that's batal. It's not batal. You still have to take out one of them to give to the kohen, but nonetheless, it doesn't become meduma. Okay, Misha Gafan. However, once he has sealed the jars. Now each one is considered significant by itself, and there's no bittul. Once you have something that's significant, which in other language is chaticha royal kabed bo, something that's own individual significance. It's again frozen. No.
Yeah,
okay, I'm back.
Back.
Okay. Back. But once something's got its own individual significance, then it cannot be batal. So it doesn't matter how many other jars are in there, then the whole lot have to be treated as truma. Okay. Achelo gafan, before he seals them, tore me'achas alakol. If he's got a whole bunch of tevel wine and he's spooned them out into separate jars and he thinks, oh my gosh, I forgot to take chumas and masros. So then he can say, okay, so let me take chumas and masros all from this place for all of these open jars, and that's 100% fine because they're all still considered one guf. Misha gafan. However, if he seals them and he says, oh my gosh, I forgot to take chumas and masros, Torah mikol echad ve'echad. Now he has to go back into each one of them and take Truma and Maaser from each one individually because each one has its own individual significance and it's been cut off from the klal.
Even though he sealed it already.
Hmm?
Even though he sealed them already.
That's because he sealed them already.
He has to open them up again and do this?
He has to open them up again and
Truma, okay.
and redo the Truma and take the Trumas and Maasers. Okay.
All right.
We can do probably one set of Chazaras here from Maaser Sheni Aleph Gimel.
Okay. If one buys cattle for peace offerings or a non-domestic animal for meat consumption, the hide becomes non-holy, even though the hide exceeds the flesh. Sealed jars of wine in localities where they are sold sealed, the jar becomes non-holy. Nuts and almonds, their shells become non-holy. Grape residue wine, before it is fermented, it may not be bought with Maaser money, and after it is fermented, it may be bought with Maaser money. If one buys a non-domestic animal for a peace offering or cattle for meat consumption, the hide does not become non-holy. Open or sealed jars of wine, where they are open, sold, the jars do not become non-holy, and baskets of olives and baskets of grapes together with the receptacle, the value of the receptacle does not become non-holy. If one buys water or salt or produce attached to the soil or produce which cannot reach Yerushalayim, he has not brought Maaser. If one brought produce in error, the money must be returned. If wittingly, it must go up and be eaten in the place. But when there is no temple, let it rot.
Yeah. I think we're going to say Ad Khan at this point because I've got to go out and pick up my daughter.
Okay.
So we'll see you
Tomorrow, Mr. Shem.
tomorrow.
Have a great day. Thank you.